Okay, so this begins a little mini series of videos I'm going to do about Dodge pickups from the 70s and what the differences are. I decided to do this video simply because suddenly I had a whole variety of them on the yard within the last month. And some are still here: 72, 73, 74, 76, 77, 78, and an 80. That covers quite a bit of the variety. In addition to the variety that I currently have, I've got all kinds of stuff, parts over the years I've gathered up. Some I still have, some I've sold. So I think I've developed a fairly good knowledge base, and I want to pass that on. This is going to be the same intro for all the videos. So if you're watching this and it's not the first one, then go back and check out my channel or the playlist that I hopefully will set up, and then you can watch all of them. I'm going to try to keep them in that 10 to 15 minute range, so I really don't know how many I'm going to have. I might have 2, I might have 15. Well, I won't have 15. I might have like 4, something like that. It kind of depends. So, but I'm going to do it in a logical manner as best I can. So the logical progression and the way these videos are going to work, the way I'm going to put them up, is how you would encounter a vehicle, whether it's online or whether you see one sitting on the side of the road for sale. Exterior first, what are the differences? Then you would probably get inside, check out the cab, then that's going to be the next thing, the interior. Then underneath the hood, the various differences under the hood. And then the last part would be mechanical and miscellaneous oddball things. Not so much mechanical, because most of the mechanical changes are going to be purely option driven, and I'm not going to get deep into options and packages and stuff like that. I'll mention some of the things, but I'm not going to get into this year had this option, this one had this, because that changed way too much. And with pickups, it was, and actually anything in the 70s really, the whole deal was if you could pay for it, the factory would make it for you. And I have seen some really weird stuff that was not, quote, available, but yet somehow was available. So I'm not, like I say, I'm just not going to get into that part of it. So here's something that I think really needs to be mentioned the way I'm doing this video. You're not going to see pristine vehicles. You're not going to see the show trucks. I'm dealing with just old, sometimes quite beat up trucks, original stuff that I don't believe has been changed or modified. In some cases, maybe never even worked on a day in its life in the last 40, almost 50 years on some of these things. The reason for that is simple. I want to know the way it was when it left the factory, and that's what I'm trying to show to you, is the way it left. Now, a nice show truck, it could be 100% perfect as factory, but I don't know that because so many of these parts are so similar, you won't notice. And I'll show you, especially when I start talking about the pickup boxes. There are a lot of differences in the boxes over the years, way more than I ever realized until, again, like I say, I started looking at them and realizing that, oh, this is different, that's different, and then really started looking at all the differences that there are. So you can see a bunch of beat up rusty things. You can see stuff like this: busted windshield, rust on it, whatever, trashy or rat infested interiors. But so long as the pieces are original, that's what I'm going for. That's what you're going to see. So please keep that in mind. Don't diss the trucks. They are what they are. All right, in this part of this video series, we're going to talk about mostly the cab, or what's in the cab, interior stuff. So we're going to talk about some dash things, some door panels, glass, mirrors, that kind of thing. It, again, sounds a little bit boring like some of the other subjects, but there's some differences, and sometimes they can be the defining differences between one year to the next, or at least being able to identify if what you think it is or what you've been told it is, if it actually is that. So that's about all for now. Next time, I think we're going to be talking about some mechanical stuff in the next video. So we're getting pretty close to the end of the series at that point, and yeah, I've got a bunch more video clips I got to take yet on the mechanical things, so hopefully I can get that out when I want to get it out. All right, thanks a lot. Have fun watching. All right, interiors, I should say dashes. We're gonna look at that right now. So this is a 1974, and you'll notice, if I can get a good shot of it here, you know, the hood over the gauges is a little more pronounced. You know, there's a kind of a body line that flows through over in the glove box door. This was run from 72 through 4. It's a nice looking design. Problem is, if you're tall like me, when you're sitting in here, the top of the speedometer kind of gets covered. Well, I think they must have got enough feedback on that, and then they changed it for the rest of the run with the 70s body. But otherwise, they're all pretty much the same. You know, this one has oil pressure gauge in. Some of them have idiot lights, but that's an option thing, and which is something I'm not going into. It's got an aftermarket radio carved into it, which is too bad. Otherwise, that bezel would have been perfectly fine. So that's about all there is to mention on the dash itself. Here we have a 1978, and you can see the change in the hood design over the gauge cluster. You know, you can see the entire speedometer, even if you're tall, unless you're like super tall, but then that's your own problem. And of course, then this body line running off the hood into glove box door, that's gone. That's typical of the rest of the 70s from 75 through 80. The bezel itself, they had a couple different versions of that. They had one that was all black, one that was silver like this. They had a wood grain version. And of course the Warlocks and the Little Reds had little pinstriping all over them and stuff. This one, again, used to have aftermarket air in, which is why it's got these weird little vents. So you can go ahead and ignore those. And since I'm here, I will mention this. The next thing is this little cover that covers the bottom where the steering column goes up into the dash assembly. That changed in 1979. Prior to that, you know, they were that wide, and now you can see this blue one came out of a 79. So 79 and 80 were different. And it's quite a bit wider, as you can see. So the whole dash assembly, the steel part, is interchangeable as a whole, so long as you take this plastic piece with it. Otherwise, you know, you'll have to just find that piece later. You know, just a minor detail. You know, I found that out the hard way. I got a dash ready for a pickup. I got it all painted and put it in, and then that didn't fit, so then I had to go scramble and look for one of those. So I thought they were all the same. They're not. All right, let's talk about interior door panels. This is on a 1972. This is the standard stock baseline door panel. As you can see, I mean, this part is metal, just like all the rest of it. This armrest pad, you will notice, if you're astute, you will see that that's the same as what they put in the full-size vans. And if you're super astute, you'll also know that that's the same thing they used in like the 67, 8, 9 B bodies. So if you need an armrest, you can go find aftermarket ones listed for that B body, and they'll never list it for a pickup, trust me. Then we have, and this was from 72 through 4, and then we have the fancier version, which is right here. And this is fiberglass, and this was usually on the Adventurer models, and there's basically the two different versions of it. Again, 72, 3, and 4. The difference, obviously, the armrest pad itself is different. The door handle is different. They're not interchangeable like pieces. You have to do like all of it or none of it. Usually, you can kind of see there's a clip there. Usually there's a chrome strip that kind of goes around that indent because it's a little fancier model. So here we have a 1978. This is the door panel that was used from 75 through 79. 80 is different, and I'll show you that in a little while. But basically the same design. Some of them had a little extra trim on. I've seen a few with, you know, the bottom piece with carpet on, but still this same design. With the armrests that are universal left to right, which is kind of nice. Because the driver's one is always bad, and usually the passenger one is good. So if you're looking for in the parts yard or whatever, you can usually find a good passenger one and just, you know, swap it out. They had another design that I'll show you again in a little bit here. I haven't seen prior to 78. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I have not seen it. So, but this is the most, by far the most common design of interior door panel, just because most of the trucks were late 70s and they made them for longer. So, okay, so obviously this is not the best example of this particular door panel interior trim, but you kind of get the idea. They were a much fancier version. I have not seen these any earlier than 78, and I've only seen 4 or 5 of them anyway. But those of you who are fans of these 70s full-size vans should recognize the actual armrest, and so should you that are fans of the like 68, 9, and 70 B-body. That armrest is the same one. They used it over and over and over again. Mopar is certainly not afraid of reusing stuff. But these were a full door panel. Like I say, I don't even know what option package this came with, because this came off of an Adventurer. I've had all kinds of other Adventurer SEs, whatever, and they haven't had this. So here's a door panel for 1980. It is obviously different from the previous years, and it is identical to the 81 and up. And of course there was different options as far as, oh, you can get the wood grain that would be in about this area on the fancier versions. But that's it. 80 is, once again, its own thing. Let's talk about seat belts. I'm in my 76 with optional shoulder belts. I say optional because they were not required by law, by federal law, until the 1978 model year. Frequently earlier models had them. The earliest I've ever seen shoulder belts in is 74, and I think I've only seen one like that. So if it doesn't have shoulder belts in, it's 77 or older. And I will show you what 73 looks like. So here we have 1973, and this little guy right here, that's just a plug. See, now, Mopar was smart enough, they knew at some point they were going to have to put seat belts in this cab, so they started making a provision for it. But there's nothing behind these. Just a hole in the metal. They stamped it in. Why, I don't know exactly, other than, I suppose, with a long, skinny arm, you could probably get in there with a nut, and you could put a seat belt in after the fact. But, you know, I've taken a lot of these apart, and it's just a plug. That's all it is. So that's about all there's to talk about on seatbelts, I guess, isn't there? So there's a little bonus fact. The best I understand it anyway. This is a 1974 club cab. Club cabs came out in 73, and Mopar was doing what they always do, using parts from somewhere else to, you know, keep the cost down. So these seats in here, because they needed the split back for the club cab so you could actually get in the back. This is a front seat from a B-body. They're a little bit narrower than a normal pickup seat. You can see there's a pretty good gap here, and they have it offset this direction because they were figuring that this was the side that most people were going to get into the back from, although both sides will flip forward. So, and then of course they also had bucket seats available, center console, you know, there are options like that, but this was the base seat. So if you have a club cab and you can't find a good seat, start roaming around for early 70s, even probably like all the B bodies through 79 should be about the same, should bolt in there the same, depending on what kind of colors and styles and all that other stuff you want. But just a little bonus fact. How about rear view mirrors? 72 through 77, they were mounted on the roof. And I will show you a 72 that didn't have one at all. This is in a 74 that we're looking at right now. So we'll come over here, take a look at this one. This is a 72. It does not have one in at all. The reason why is this was originally a camper truck, so it was intended to have some big gigantic thing behind it, so having a rear view mirror in the middle would do absolutely no good. And I'm sure that probably saved them $6 going down the assembly line, so they weren't going to put it in. Here we have a 1978, and you can see the rear view mirror is glued to the windshield itself, and that, like I say, changed in 78. The windshields are the same otherwise, so if you have an older truck and they're probably not going to show a number for that anyway, or it's going to just supersede to the newer number, and you'll end up with this little button where the mirror goes. Well, you can do one of two things. So long as it's not a windshield that has the black frit primer around there, which some of them do now and some of them don't. If it doesn't have that, you can very carefully take a heat gun, warm that button up, and then with the pliers, slowly twist on it, and it should pop right off. Don't get it too hot, otherwise you have risk cracking your brand new windshield, or if it's a used windshield, whatever. But that's the only difference between the windshields, if they do actually show a number, or you just deal with the button and hope your mirror should actually cover that so you won't see it, at least from the inside. So one last thing about windshields that I need to mention about interchangeability. The 72 through 79 are interchangeable, plus or minus the windshield button, whether you've got it or not. 1980, they changed. They got significantly thinner than the old ones. And when if you go order a windshield for a 75, 76, whatever, they're probably going to supersede it to a DW 914, which is the 80s body style, which is like 80 and up. That's fine, so long as you get a gasket to go with it. Because the windshield, like I said, the windshield is like half as thick. It's like the two laminates are about as thick as the single laminate with the old ones. And for whatever, and you can lay the windshields, and believe me, I've ran into this problem. You can lay those windshields right on top of each other. They're exactly the same size. You go to put them in, granted this is sideways right now, and it won't fill up the gasket enough. You'll have a gap. You'll be able to see between the gasket and the actual A-pillar. For whatever reason, that little bit of thickness makes a huge difference with that gasket. Or that gasket is just, maybe the gap between here and where the windshield sits is different. Whatever it is, I don't know. But you cannot put that newer glass in the old gasket. You can put the newer glass in the old hole so long as you have the right gasket. And you can put the newer windshield, the older windshield in the newer vehicle so long as the gasket goes with. You know, the old windshield won't even fit in the new gasket. It's physically too wide. So be very aware of that if you're dealing with windshields. If you're, just call your random glass place and say you need a windshield, and if they give you the DW 914, I'm pretty sure that's the number, make sure you get a gasket with it too, or ask if you can actually get the old number, which I forget, it was a 758, I think. It was the DW number. I don't quote me on that. I don't remember exactly for sure what the old DW number was. But so there you go. Windshields. They're easy if you know the trick. So one quick thing about back windows, and this has black contact paper on it, which is why it looks weird. The opening for all of them is the same. However, 72, 3, and 4 windows were a slightly different size and shape, so they had a different gasket that went with them. So if you're going to take a newer, so a lot of the interchange will give that 75 and newer break. It's fine so long as you take glass and gasket together from older into newer, newer into older. It works fine. Windshield mirrors come in like 3 sizes, 4 sizes. Small, medium. There's actually 2 mediums, large and extra large. Here's a small, typical little cheap mirror. Same thing you'd find on, actually, oddly enough, some of the fancier ones. Here is medium. I guess the smaller medium, just because it's got 3 posts instead of 4. Mirror heads are generally the same size, although there's a few different sizes, and aftermarket ones are pretty close, so sometimes it's hard to tell what's original and what's not. Occasionally you'll see differences in the length of these pieces, so they can get a little farther out. This one has got some weird extra piece in it, I think to do with the camper package, but otherwise, pretty standard issue. This is what I'll call the little bigger medium, just because it's a 4-post instead of 3. But the mirror head is, generally speaking, the same size. This is what I would consider large. It's another 4-poster, but it's a much larger one. It reaches farther in the door, it reaches farther out, and then of course you could swing this arm the opposite direction and get even farther away, better view. So I suppose if it's a 1-ton with dualies, that would come in handy if you're pulling a trailer. And then I do not have on the yard what I would consider the extra large. I will show you a picture of one. It's no longer on the vehicle, but they would attach at the top of the door up here, and then also down here, so that, and then it's a truck mirror, usually found on the 600s and larger, but I have seen a couple of them on just 1-tons. So available, but really unusual, and in a lot of ways not very practical, just because they're so stinking huge. Unless you're pulling something really big, then they're super awesome.